Evidence shows summarizing, highlighting, and rereading are poor techniques when it comes to retaining information. Active recall and practice testing have been shown to be significantly better in regard to improving content retention in less time. Here's how to study for more in less time. Hey guys, welcome. My name is Zach and I'm a medical student in Philadelphia. In this video, I'll talk about the not so good study techniques, that's taking notes, highlighting, and the worst offender, rereading. Then I will go into the good study techniques, that is active recall and practice testing. Finally, I will show you how to actually implement these strategies and start doing better. All the articles I reference will be in the notes. If you want to jump to the summary and implementation, go to this timestamp, as I spend a decent amount of time justifying my strategies of why I picked what strategy and why I left out the other ones. I remember sitting down and looking at my anatomy textbook for my first exam in October, my first ever anatomy exam in med school. The exam was 3 days away and I had to learn the anatomy of the back, the shoulder, and the chest, the blood vessels that supply them, and the nerves that make them move. I flipped open Grant's Atlas of Anatomy and began rereading what I'd already learned in hopes that something would stick in my annoying brain. The infraspinatus muscle, aided by the teres minor. Okay, ignore that awful British accent, but the infra what? No, that wasn't going in my brain. But the genius that I am, I repeated that method of rereading for the next 3 days. I repeated that method and saw no improvement in retention, and I did pretty badly on the exam. I can't fail med school. I mean, I worked so hard to get here. The MCAT studying alone, I took 3 gap years. So I began asking all my friends, how do you study, what works? And I got a variety of responses from different people, but the one that stuck in my head was a response I got from my friend Fred when he said how he got an 100%. I asked how he studied and he said he never even opened a textbook, so I said, how can you do that? He used an app called Anki and he just constantly quizzed himself. So I tried it. On my next exam, my scores went up. On the one after that, they went up again. I was never going back to my old rereading strategies. Hopefully by the end of this video, you will learn from my mistakes, fix your ineffective studying, and improve your content retention and therefore your test scores. So what shouldn't you do? Let's start with summarizing. Now, summarizing isn't the worst offender on this list, but you might be better off spending your time with other revision techniques these researchers suggested. A review article from 2013 by Dunlosky et al. Looked at 10 learning techniques. They gave the techniques a relative rating of either low utility, moderate utility, or high utility. Guess where summarizing, highlighting, and rereading fit in? Low utility. They said, on the basis of available evidence, we rate summarization as low utility. So yeah, try not to use summarization that much. Next is highlighting. Highlighting I don't do. I never had, I never underlined, I never did anything like that. But I have a bunch of friends that have the most amazing and pretty textbooks. They had 4 different colored highlighters. Some insane people even had 6 highlighters. What do you need 6 highlighters for? I don't know. But anyway, they color coded their textbook, and I always wanted to review from their textbooks because I thought, wow, they spend so much time picking out the good information in their textbook. I need to read it. I need to look at it and see what they've picked out. I always thought they must be doing really well on their tests because their textbooks were just so nice. But I was wrong. It turns out my friends, I was thinking of 2 in particular, never really scored that well on exams, and they had the prettiest textbook. So what was Dunlosky et al.'s analysis of highlighting and underlying? They said, on the basis of available evidence, we rate highlighting and underlying as having low utility. In most situations that have been examined, and with most participants, highlighting does little to boost performance. They continued to say, it may actually hurt performance on higher level tasks that require inference making. So highlighting I never did, but now I'll never do it. So rereading is the way the majority of students review, I think. Many of my friends in college, post-bac, and now in medical school use this strategy, and this applies to lectures. They just reread PowerPoint lectures and stuff like this, and I occasionally do it, but it seems to take hours and hours. But I always thought, if you read it really slowly and carefully and understand the information, you'll do better on your exams, right? Well, let's see what Dunlosky et al. Said. The relative disadvantage of rereading to other techniques is the largest strike against rereading and is the factor that weighed most heavily in our decision to assign it a rating of low utility. So what they're saying is that it simply takes too much time in relation to the benefits of other techniques to do rereading. And as I was looking at like other papers and stuff like that, a bunch of them said rereading wasn't great. One study that looked at 177 college students' study habits said, repeated testing enhances learning more than repeated reading, which confers limited benefit beyond that gained from the initial reading of the material. So let's go back to that last line. In regards to repeated rereading, they said, repeated rereading has limited benefits beyond that gained from the initial reading of the material. So to summarize everything of before, summarizing, highlighting, and rereading are inefficient and effective. So what do I do? How do I do better in my anatomy exam? What techniques do I use now? Well, there are two techniques that are really supported by the researchers, and these techniques are active recall and practice testing. Active recall is answering a question with no supporting information. No notes, no pictures, no anything. Just think of it looking at a flashcard and then having to know what's on the back. It's really not that easy. I mean, I probably do 3 to 6 hours of flashcards a day, every morning, using the Pomodoro method, and I actually feel like my brain working harder than when I'm just rereading lecture notes. Now, my retention of these 1,000 flashcards isn't 100%, it's around 90%, but I think that's much better than it would be from just rereading the facts. Morris et al. Asked participants to try and remember as many people's names as they could in a party scenario. So imagine you're at a party and you have to kind of remember as many people's names as you meet as you can. So what they did is they had one group use active recall and retrieval practice to remember the names, while the other group was simply shown the names multiple times, then asked to remember them. Who did better out of this group? The active recall group recalled 11.5 names on average, while the other group remembered only 5.8. That's nearly an 100% difference based on just using active recall. Another article from Yale, really nicely named How to Learn Effectively in Medical School, said, active recall is significantly more effective learning strategy than passive restudying of the facts. So practice testing has a pretty big role. It's helped me out a ton, especially when I was studying for the MCAT, but it's doing questions that hopefully mimic the exam or whatever test you're gonna take as closely as possible. And it's a form of active recall. Let's go back to that Yale review article. Testing as an active element of learning is more effective than studying the factual knowledge repeatedly. Okay, so it seems like active recall and practice testing sound pretty good, but I'm gonna throw 4 more research papers at you guys to really drive this home, and then I promise you can begin burning your highlighted notes and start making your flashcards. Don't burn your notes. Yeah, I think that caused a fire. Anyway, one experiment took 324 undergrads and surveyed their study habits in correlation with their GPA. The top performers with a GPA of 3.7 to 4.0 indicated more frequently that they tested themselves with practice questions, while students with the lowest GPA of 1.7 to 2.1 reported significantly less usage of self-testing. The students with a low GPA just didn't use practice testing as much. Another question they asked these students is, if you quiz yourself, why do you do it? And the choices they said were 1, I learn more that way than I would rereading. 2, to figure out how well I have learned the information I am studying. 3, they said I find quizzes more enjoyable than rereading. 4, I usually do not quiz myself. So what did the top performers say, the students that had the highest GPA? Well, they answered that I quiz myself to figure out how well I have learned the information I am studying. Also notice how few, less than 5% of the top performers indicated I usually do not quiz myself. So they're using this quiz to kind of get a feel of how well they're doing. 2 more articles to really show this. In 2019, a USC paper looked at pharmacy students. One group of students rewatched lectures and another group did retrieval practice or active recall. They concluded testing may be more efficient, i.e. cost efficient, for long-term performance. Students who attend classes may want to avoid rewatching course recordings in favor of practice testing. So that first review article that we looked at, that looked at 10 learning methods from Dunlosky et al. One paper they looked at students' reading comprehension. Some students were given practice tests while others were not. The higher ability readers who took practice tests had an approximately 20% improvement of accuracy from those who did not. So that's like a 2-letter grade improvement from just using practice testing. That's insane. They concluded, rightly so, that practice testing was high utility, one of the only 2 studying methods out of 10 studying methods they looked at to receive that rating. Finally, the good stuff, how do we take all these smart people's advice and actually integrate it into our lives? How can I do better? And how did I end up doing better? Well, first, cut out highlighting, summarizing, and especially rereading. The evidence is there that these methods really just don't cut it. But my guess is if the researchers had to pick one thing that you had to change, it would be eliminate rereading. They really didn't like that stuff. And that includes rewatching lectures, rewatching YouTube videos, rereading your notes, kind of rewatching everything. What has worked for me is to get a basic understanding of the topic and then quickly move on to active recall and practice testing. Secondly, practice active recall with flashcards. I use Anki, a flashcard app. This helps me retain everything I've learned throughout my first year of medical school, and it's had a huge impact on me and my scores. It doesn't work for everyone, so keep that in mind, but if you haven't tried it out, I really suggest you just try it out to see if you like it, because if you like it, it can make a pretty big change in how you're doing. It took me about 4 months of constant work to actually figure out how to use and make flashcards effectively. I'll be making a video on this in the future, but it's definitely a learning curve, but a learning curve that pays off in the end. But again, regardless of whatever method you use, you must, for the long-term retention, test yourself consistently and repeatedly. You just gotta do it. Third and final, test yourself. Use book questions, teacher practice questions, anything you can get your hands on that mimic exam style questions. Do as many of these you can under as close to exam conditions as you can. When I was studying for the MCAT, I split my 98-day study plan into 3 phases. Learning new content, doing content questions, and practice tests. Guess which one of these 3 phases I saw the biggest jump in my test scores? I really hope you can answer that question by now. If you can't answer that question by now, keep checking your mailbox. I'll be sending some flashcards over on the talking points of this YouTube video. Then, I will be testing you. You may see me at the grocery store, the gym, your frozen yogurt place that's definitely healthier than the ice cream you eat. Oh, you wanna go to the beach? A vacation? Oh, I'll have a chair ready for you with 3 questions on content retention waiting. 3 years later, when you're laying in bed on a rainy Sunday morning after a long night out, tired and wondering when the next Zach Highley video will come out, bam! But seriously, the answer was practice testing, practice testing, practice testing. When I implemented practice testing, I saw MCAT practice test score go up from the 53rd percentile to the 90th. Then when I actually took my exam, I scored in the 97th percentile. So what I have learned across all these research papers and in my personal experience going through 8 years plus of higher education, that rereading, highlighting, and summarizing just don't cut it. Active recall, practice testing are really the best ways you can improve your content retention and score. I hope you found that helpful. I'd love to know what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? What studying techniques do you use that work? What studying techniques do you use that don't work? But yeah, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.